There's no denying it. Societies across the world are becoming more and more diverse, and the question now is how should people best navigate these increasingly diverse societies? Social psychologists have some ideas. There are plenty of benefits of a more diverse society, but there are also obstacles in the way of achieving those wonderful benefits, as lots of research in social psychology has shown, and as you may have noticed if you just look out into the world. The question we face as citizens of a diverse society is, what are the best ways to navigate this world? How can we best achieve these outcomes? And researchers have identified a few different ideologies as they pertain to diversity. In other words, people differ in what they think the right way to manage diverse societies is. One of these ideologies is one you're probably already pretty familiar with because it's a pretty common way to talk about diversity, and that is what we call colorblindness. Now, the idea of colorblindness is just to say that we should approach diversity by looking to what unites us, looking to what the similarities are across all people, and downplaying the differences between them. You can characterize this in some ways as saying, I don't see race, and I don't see gender, and I don't see this or that. But it comes down to that idea that the notion of colorblindness is that the best way to navigate a diverse society is to ignore the ways that people are different, to ignore race and to ignore gender, etc. This is what Martin Luther King meant when he said we should judge people by the content of their character and not the color of their skin. But contrast this with another worldview, which is called multiculturalism. Now, multiculturalism, instead of saying that we should downplay differences, says that we should embrace those differences and acknowledge that race, gender, etc. bring with them a rich historical and cultural context that we can't ignore. And instead, we should embrace the fact that people come to a situation from all sorts of backgrounds. You can think of colorblindness as that idea of America as a melting pot. Where lots of people from different backgrounds are coming together and fusing into one homogeneous, gelatinous, cheesy bundle. Whereas multiculturalism is more of a tossed salad metaphor to say that lots of different people are coming together from very different perspectives that bring with them unique contributions to the whole, but are nevertheless important to acknowledge those unique contributions. Now, here's the thing about these two ideologies. They're both well-intentioned, and they're both meant to serve the same goal, which is that in this diverse society, how do we best embrace it and move forward? But social psychologists have been conducting research lately to look at whether one of these ideologies is any better than the other at actually achieving the goals that we want. So as a quick snapshot of the results, it's looking like colorblindness is counterproductive relative to multiculturalism. Even though treating people as equals and ignoring the differences between groups may seem like exactly the right way forward, it can kind of come across a little weird. It can come across as though you're downplaying and ignoring something that actually is a real experience on the part of lots of people. Let's take a look at one study that pit these two worldviews against one another to see if, in a real-world context, one of these worldviews was associated with better diversity outcomes. A team of researchers went into a large company and surveyed department by department both white employees and racial ethnic minority employees. And each time they asked slightly different questions. When talking to the white employees, they asked them, generally, whether they thought colorblindness was the proper way to live in a diverse society, or whether they thought multiculturalism was a more appropriate way to live in a diverse society. And so each department got a score in terms of how much white employees in those departments embraced colorblindness versus multiculturalism. When they talked to the minority employees in these departments, they asked different questions. They asked questions like, how engaged do you feel in your work? And what's the tone of your department? Do you feel as though diversity is really embraced here? The results are fairly straightforward. The more a department embraced colorblindness, on average, amongst its white employees as the right way to approach diversity, the less engaged minority employees in that department felt, and the more toxic they thought the diversity climate was in that department. By contrast, the more white employees in a department had embraced multiculturalism as the way forward in a diverse society, the better off minority employees were within those departments. The results of this study paint a pretty clear picture, which is that colorblindness, despite potentially good intentions, just isn't associated with the kinds of good, positive diversity outcomes that people want to think that it is. Multiculturalism seems instead to be a more fruitful road forward. Now, this is just one of many studies that have explored colorblindness versus multiculturalism, and of course, both of them have their merits because they're both meant to be diversity promoting, but each of them also have their drawbacks. But when we kind of pull back the lens and look in the grand scheme of things, lots of researchers seem to conclude that colorblindness is not the optimal strategy, and that multiculturalism may be. But multiculturalism still isn't perfect. So next time, we're going to come back and talk about how multiculturalism can be smushed around a little bit to achieve even more positive outcomes. So until then, have a good one. For more social psychology, subscribe to this YouTube channel, or go to beapeopleexpert.com and find new articles every week about psychological science.